Coming to you live from just outside the swamp of the nation's capital. Get ready for invigorating talk, commentary, and debate on the issues affecting your life. Grab your favorite drink. It's Nightcaps with Nate. Now, here's Nate.
Hey, welcome back to a special Friday edition of Nightcaps with Nate. I'm Nate, and we have a full screen of people here, so there may be some little glitches here and there. Forgive me. Hey, by the way, if you are just now joining us, make sure that you, if you want to comment at all, go to the Nightcaps with Nate page. We got a lot of feedback noise, whatever that is. Okay, and go to subscribe to Nightcaps with Nate on YouTube. Believe it or not, we have gotten a lot more on thing. If you have any other stuff turned up, make sure it goes down because it feeds right back into our thing. All right, so tonight is a very special edition because what we're going to do here is we are going to have an actual hard topic discussion tonight. This was in the making since we started talking to people of color that happen to be conservative, and Natalie was kind of debating them, and so I promised her, hey, you know what, let's have a full hour, even if we have to go a little more than an hour, let's have a full show on what it's like to be black and Hispanic in Trump's America. And so that's basically the premise of the show. From the top left, you will see Jasper. You've noticed him before. He is a conservative. And then you have me in the middle. Of course, I'm more libertarian conservative, so is Jasper, by the way. On your top right, you have Gabriel. Gabriel Martinez is a cop in a major city. His union has asked us not to reveal what city he's in for his protection and safety. And but he is Hispanic and conservative. We have Kareem Jackson. He is black and Republican. He is from the great city of Chicago, by the way. Jasper is from Atlanta. Gabriel, where are you from originally?
Originally, I'm from Houston.
Houston, okay.
Houston, Texas. Yep.
And he does speak Espanol. And then you have my sister, the very beautiful Natalie Damaris. That is not her original last name. That's her married last name. And but she is a Kerr. She is the black sheep of my family because she is now the only. Well, there's kind of another half progressive in our family, but he's wobbling right now. And
I'm the only enlightened one in our family.
Yeah, the only enlightened one. And then, of course, we have Dr. James Key. Dr. James Key, let me pull up his little bio here, is a dynamic, inspirational public speaker and chaplain. He's a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. His writing and commentary has been featured in a number of different outlets, including USA Today, Chicago Sun-Times, Los Angeles Sentinel, National Public Radio, which is my favorite news outlet, by the way. Little bit biased, but not too bad. Spectrum News and AFN, American Forces Network Korea. His previous book is entitled Touch and Go, From the Streets of South Central LA to the War in Iraq. He was reared in the Crenshaw district of LA and graduated from Dorsey High School. Received a Bachelor's of Arts in Speech Communication from Cal State University Northridge. A Master's of Theology and World Religions from, oh man, I don't know why you chose this school. University of Phoenix. No, I'm just joking. It's Princeton Theological Seminary. And it's Master's of Divinity and Doctor of Ministry degrees in Politics and Religion from Howard University School of Divinity. I'm not going to go through all his military direction. This kind of, we see these a lot in the military. He is the recipient of the Los Angeles NAACP Men of Valor Award and Los Angeles Dodgers Military Hero of the Game. He travels throughout the United States giving thought-provoking speeches, sermons, and workshops. He currently lives in Victorville, California, with his wife, Simone, and his two children, James III and Amara. That's a whole mouthful. That's good. I served with Chaplain Key as I knew him, James. Dr. Key, we'll call him for the rest of the show. He was, we were a leadership team over a chaplain recruiting team in Columbia, Maryland. So he was... Yes. He was a chaplain, so they're not allowed to take command, but he was my boss, essentially, and I was kind of his chief of staff with all the recruiters. So, yes. And we rocked it over there. We loved serving. We used to have some great conversations. How he and I got together and we never once raised our voice at each other or anything, and he is the polar opposite of politically a lot of times than I am. And we were actually serving when President Obama decided to do his executive action with DACA and DARPA. And I said, man.
That's correct.
And I called it. Didn't I call it way in advance Trump was going to win?
You did.
I did.
You did early on.
Yep.
I have to. You were absolutely correct. We had great conversation about
I love talking about Trump and Obama, President Trump, the elections. When I finally went to headquarters on Fort Meade, even when he'd come by, we'd still sneak off and talk a little politics here and there. So, hey, who's going to win this election? Will it be Biden?
It's going to be tough. I mean, I think that Biden is going to have to really stimulate his base, the Democratic Party, the African American community. And he's going to have to really do a good job and get out there. He really should find ways to be out there even more so.
Who are you hoping? Who are you hoping for in the out of the primaries?
Well, look, Biden certainly is going to be the candidate for the Democrats, and they can't underestimate President Trump. He has a machine out there. There are a lot of people who support him, and so they cannot take him lightly. If they want to regain the White House and flip the Senate, they've got a lot of work to do.
I think they have a better chance of flipping Senate than taking the White House.
Probably. That may be the consolation prize. It could be.
I think it is.
Yeah.
And then that's going to be hard, but it'll be a half win for you guys because then you guys can put your thumb really on the judicial nominees and stuff, which is the most important thing anyways. Who were you hoping came out as the winner of that primary?
Well, I didn't really have a big dog in the hunt. Of course, Bernie Sanders had the big ideas, and he's always had that. He had a lot of things that he wanted to do that perhaps he, may not have been able to deliver on ultimately, but he was bold enough to at least highlight the big ideas. And I've always been kind of the underdog person. My baptism into politics, and I'm going to date myself, goes back to my years in undergraduate school, working as a student on the campaign for Jesse Jackson, 84 and 88. So that was my baptism into politics, just to really, we knew Reverend Jackson wasn't going to win, but we also knew he would raise the right questions and raise the right issues. And ultimately, that's what you want a candidate to do, is to raise the right issues, raise the right questions at the right time. And on the flip side, that's what President Trump was able to do. And really just, for lack of a better word, I don't even want to use, well, he was just able to run a full court press.
Right.
Become president of the United States. And if you're a student of politics, you really do have to use that as a case study.
Of course. Every election's a case study. Bill Clinton was my favorite case study.
Great case study.
And now, final question for politics before we get into actual debate time. I know everybody's kind of like, what the heck are you guys talking about? But I remember you saying that Bernie was too old back in the day on the first election, and now here he is. If they pull Biden out and they put, let's say, Cuomo in his place, what do you think the Bernie factor is going to do?
Well,
will it be all-out civil war?
No, there are a lot of compassionate people out there, the Bernie folk, and a lot of young people. In fact, my kids were in college age now, in college, and they were both Bernie fans.
What if they were Trump fans? Would you have cried?
I love politics enough to appreciate both sides of the aisle. Now, I didn't, arrive at this point overnight. It took a while to get here. I can, certainly have an appreciation for both sides of the aisle. Although President Trump is a unique Republican compared to your vast majority of Republicans in the House and the Senate, but he has. I
think he's a quasi-Republican. He's like a little mix of both, really. He's kind of a populist.
Democrat at one point.
Yeah, he is a populist. You can see it. He's actually probably the most pro-LGBTQ Republican that we've had in the White House, because George W. was what we'd call the religious right, the born again. Right. I don't think he's.
But I tell you, who was a fascinating politician was Daddy Cuomo, and
Andrew Cuomo, Mario.
His father.
Mario.
Yes, his father. And I remember meeting him as a college student. He was really a dynamic speaker, and just from the 80s through the 90s, he was a great politician.
But he sure raised the DB, who the guy on CNN. He's a fakester coming out of the basement like he did.
Yeah, that's true. He was with Fox for quite some time before he came over.
Was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he does. You can actually see a little. That's what if Cuomo somehow beat Trump, I wouldn't cry like I would say even a Biden or anything, because Andrew Cuomo is actually a pragmatist. He reminds me a lot of Bill Clinton. All right, let's move on to the debate, because this is what everybody came here to watch, and let's go over some ground rules real quick. The ground rules are as follows. Nate will give an opening presentation of his views as a starting point for discussion and debate. After that, Natalie will have the opportunity after the presentation to ask questions. I will also ask questions, but Natalie's here to kind of help James Key if James feels a little outnumbered, but I know James, he's not going to. James will get the most questions, so don't feel bad if you only get 1 or 2 questions asked of you in only 30 seconds. James will actually get up to 2 minutes to answer any question because he is the main guest and the main one, and you guys can all rebut at 30 seconds apiece, and that will add up to his time. Natalie can present facts to assist James. Nate will try to just moderate but can ask follow-on questions. If anyone gets long-winded, I will cut you off. And no personal attacks, no PC police, no easily getting offended. In other words, if you are a liberal and watching this and you need your trigger warning, this may be it, okay? I'm not going to put a sign up, warning, snowflakes, trigger, or anything like that. So, are you guys ready to do this?
Yes.
All right, let's do it. So, Nate's going to do his little presentation now, and then we will get going. All right, first thing, my hypothesis. My hypothesis goes as follows, all right? Right now, we're talking about the macro, not the individual. So if I talk about, say, single parenthood, yes, you may have been raised by an awesome mother. So was President Obama. He's a product of single parents. It's not everybody. It's like smokers. Not all smokers get lung cancer, but enough to where we try to say, hey, don't smoke, kids, right? All right, my hypothesis goes like this. Due to the family breakdown since the 1970s, a welfare system that punishes marriage and the glorification of promiscuity in modern music and media, there exists a direct correlation between parental makeup and child poverty and crime. As you can see on the right-hand side, marriage drops the probability of childhood poverty by 82%. Since poverty and crime go hand in hand, negative stereotypes emerge of violence in minority communities, and thus some police and those that call themselves police or that call the police themselves sometimes overreact to people of color in day-to-day dealings, many times violating the Fourth Amendment right of minorities, such as stop and frisk, which I'm totally against as a libertarian, by the way, and white vigilantes committing outright homicide like we saw with Ahmaud Arbery. This is due both to racism, learned trait through conditioning, and fear from the constant news of gang beatings, murders, flash mobs, etc., and the glorification. In other words, people see it all the time, and so now when they see a group of black men, they're like, holy crap, get out of here, right? The Democrat Party, though, is not to fix. This is where the main premise of my debate is. Democrats have fooled the minority community to think that they are the party for them. Democrat Party fears two-parents and God-worshiping homes that reduce the reliance on government and thus less for-sure votes. This, in turn, keeps people of color in poverty and in crime-ridden neighborhoods. Candace Owens calls it the plantation. Democrats, especially white Democrats, only find Jesus every election year to campaign in predominantly black churches. Other than that, most are atheists. My sister. Therefore, one half of the electorate has no incentive to fix the problem, instead casting perpetual victimhood on black and Hispanic communities, destroying traditional marriage, replacing fathers in the home with lifelong poverty programs. So can it ever really change? So let me go into my real quick analysis here. If you look at this chart, single parent homes, biracial makeup, Asian Pacific Islanders all the way to the left have the lowest rate of single-parent homes. They also have nearly the lowest rate of childhood poverty and absolutely the lowest rate of homicide in America. White people are next. You can see it correlates. Followed by Hispanics here in the middle. You can see how it correlates. American Indian, believe it or not, has the second highest rate of single parenthood, and they also have the second highest rate of child poverty and the second highest rate of homicide, and the African American community has a 65% single parenthood rate. They have the highest child poverty rate and the highest homicide rate. That, in my opinion, is no coincidence. So that's the premise here. And here's another chart that shows you married versus unmarried. If you take, let's say, the Hispanic single mother families are actually now the poorest, but you get them, when they're married, they drop down to a 14.8% poverty rate, and that's because a lot of them are first-term immigrants. Look at the black, the non-Hispanic, white, all races, Asian, okay? So, now new research published in Education Next shows that by the age of 24, individuals who live in single-parent families as adolescents have received fewer years of schooling and are less likely to obtain a bachelor's degree. We know that education and poverty and crime all go hand in hand. Finally, it is slowly changing. As you can see, we have the Blexit movement, which is the black exit movement championed by Candace Owens. Recent polling showed that Trump has actually reached up to a 38% approval rating with it was either 20 or 38% with black males, which if that holds true, that could be enough to tip key states. Black females tend to still be calcitrant with the Democrat Party. They only gave Trump a 4%. 4% approval rating. Hispanics have actually given a lot. Trump is actually making a play for the black and Hispanic vote. Nate's ideas. This is my last soapbox. Reform tax and welfare code to encourage two-parent homes, create a marriage bonus for SNAP and TAMP, and then phase out welfare slowly for those dependent on it so that they do not have a fear of getting married and losing their benefits. Call Democrat Party out on their evil plan to remain in power. In my opinions, Democrats are either, no offense, ignorant or evil. Okay? The evil ones are the ones in power. They are purposely addicting people of color by creating them as victims and never going to get them off welfare, because if you go off welfare, you tend to end up starting to vote Republican. Create an incentive for more men in the classroom. We need more men to mentor these young Hispanic and black children. Hire more police officers. Teach police officers that there is a Fourth Amendment. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty. And if you look at a whole race as the evil one, you against them, then you don't have any business being a cop. But when the officers are in the correct, you need to back them up judiciously and then educate police leaders, white community, that no community is prone to violence or criminality. In other words, black people, brown people, white people, Asian, all start as children of God. They're all equally capable of making a living. Yes, some has structural racism to get over, which we're going to talk about today. But nobody is born an inherent criminal. No group of people is born more stupid than the other. It is all about the nurturing that they get from the time they're born till the time they become adults. That is what determines their life. I grew up in poverty. I made it, and so can you. And I will leave it at that. I'm going to give Chaplain Key or Dr. Key a chance to go ahead and give his little opening remarks. Go ahead, if you have them.
I think the conversation about race is very important to have. I just completed a book, should be out June or July, entitled A Long Way from Crenshaw, Lessons and Stories About Race, Love, Honor, and Faith for These Changing Times. And I really focused on the issue of race as part one of the book, because race, the question of race, is really a part of the DNA of the U.S., of the USA. It's in our DNA, whether we like it or not. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing. The beauty of it is we need to have more conversations like this. And we need to have open and honest conversations about race and what it's done to all of us. It has left a scar on all of us. But at the same time, we can be a beacon of light, a beacon of hope for other countries that do not have to deal with the question of race the way we do in the United States, of America. You go to countries that are homogenous, whether it's Korea, Japan, and other countries, Middle East. They're not dealing with the question of affirmative action or dealing with the question of Black Lives Matter and those kind of issues. But here in America, we have to deal with those kind of issues, and sometimes it's uncomfortable. For African American people, and I certainly don't speak for the vast 12, 13, 14% of African Americans in the US, but certainly we got off to a rough start, and I think everybody will agree to that. We arrived here as enslaved people, and then we, had to deal with slavery and everything that was associated with it, post-slavery, and we really get into legalized segregation, and then we move into the Jim Crow era, not to mention other agitators like the Klan and other groups that sought to keep African American people down.
Redlining.
Sometimes redlining and all those kind of issues. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a rough start. We've made a lot of progress. We can certainly look back at history and look at where we were and look at where we are today and clearly suggest that we've made a lot of progress. Are we living in a post-racial era based on the presidency of President Obama? I would say no. We're making progress, but we still have a long way to go. We still have more conversation to have. And so I'm just glad that I have the opportunity today to listen to you, to the guests, and add my 2 cents. And certainly say this. In terms of the political parties, Republican versus Democrat, who's done more for who, the best way to approach, I think, politics, especially as it relates to Republicans versus Democrats, is what we have to do, all of us, no matter what party you're in, you're a part of. We have to hold our parties accountable. And we do need African Americans in the Republican Party. I've always said that. But they've got to feel like they're wanted.
Well, we want you, Dr. Key.
But there's, we have to push and pull both parties to do the right thing. And if we don't, then we're letting both parties off the hook.
Yeah.
So I do.
Samantha says you're a fantastic speaker, Dr. Key. You already got a new fan here. Eric, can you hear him better now? Eric Lisa, sorry. By the way, this is live, so people are actually giving us feedback and commentary as we go. Eric Lisa, sorry, but I can't really hear James Key. James is a very soft-spoken person. He literally sounds like, in real life, he sounds like Denzel Washington when he's speaking. He's very calm.
I'm going to turn it up a little bit and use my preaching voice. But...
Yep, use that preaching voice. I'll get the organ in the background. So Natalie's gone, so we agree. I agree. I think that the Democrat Party has used you guys in the fact has used both the Hispanic community and the Black community, only caring about them every 4 years, promising them a bunch of stuff, doesn't deliver, but because it has been so reliable, they've been allowed to get off the hook and not really care as much. Why don't you, Jasper, real quick, 30 seconds, tell them how you got into being a conservative. Maybe I would call it a testimony, but that's as if like you found salvation. I don't want people to think that I think coming over to the right side of salvation. But go ahead and give your life 30-second life story.
Of course. Well, grew up in poverty, family, staunch Democrats, still staunch Democrats today. But as a high school student, I got a job working with a guy from church, and he would have Sean Hannity on the radio. And I never heard those ideas before, that type of speak, and it made a lot of sense to me. Work for anything you want, and you can get it. If you work hard enough, you can get what you want. And I've always come from the family of, well, we got to wait for our check to get here this month, or, I don't have enough food stamps for this, and I always thought that's how things work. You got a certain amount of money a month and you have to work what you got. I didn't really think, I can go get a job or get a better job and work hard and do what I need to do. And it kind of drove me to explore conservatism a little bit more. And I went from exploring conservatism to really agreeing with a lot with the libertarian idea. So that's where I am today.
Okay. And Jasper, Kareem, go ahead and give your 30-second spiel and tell them how your wife feels about it. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, I'm Kareem. I was born and raised in Chicago, projects, South Side, West Side, all the urban parts of Chicago. And like most African Americans, we grow in poverty. We grew up believing that Democrats is way to go. If it's a Democrat, I don't care who he is, what color, race. If he's Democrat, let's vote for him. And we never questioned. Well, as a child, I never heard the question of what are they really doing for us. And as I got older and matured as a man and started raising my family and understanding the difference between Democrats and Republicans and really listening to what they are providing for the people, then I started to take a different approach. And I like what the Republicans are saying. Now I have voted for some Democrats in the past, but I'm starting to take more of a conscious effort of diving in deeper. What are they offering? And teaching my kids to do the same thing. But my wife, she's a little different, so it's a little house divided.
She even got the kids against them.
Yeah. So, and I don't have a problem with that because we're blessed. They're blessed to have choices, and I think by having two parents in the household, a mother and a father, that's the beauty of it. You have choices because you get two perspectives of life, and then they can make a conscious decision. So, but my wife is coming around. We're working on it here. Yeah. But the best thing is finding that candidate that provides the best opportunity for you, and that's different depending on who you are.
Hey, from a Hispanic point, go ahead, Gabriel.
So I grew up poor. A lot of my friends were on the left, and growing up, they always told me, Republicans, or they always demonized Republicans. I never knew why. And as I got older, I asked my father, what party do you align yourself with? He said, I don't really align myself in any party. He's like, just Hard work and dedication yield results.
Yeah.
If anyone's to blame, it's usually your fault. He never pointed the blame at anyone else. It's not the fault of the government. It's not the fault of that person here or there. He's like, before you point the finger at anyone else, point the finger at yourself first. Look at yourself first. And as I got older, I saw myself aligning myself more with, I wouldn't say Republican, but more conservative values, because I see myself more as a libertarian. And that's kind of where I am there. And even with my own kids, I don't really talk too much politics. I teach them more values as opposed to politics, because politics can be misconstrued a lot of ways. As we can see that every 4 years.
Yeah. Natalie, what question do you have now that you are alive and well?
Okay. Well, okay. So a lot of you are saying, that, like Gabriel was just saying, that, hey, my dad never blamed anybody, he says, before you blame anybody else, blame yourself and that kind of thing. And, it reminds me a lot of during the Great Recession, I watched so many people. I was really young. I was about 20 or 21, at the time. And I remember watching a lot of people lose their jobs. Just a lot of layoffs and a lot of people. And I remember a lot of people took a lot of that on themselves, and they felt guilty, or they felt like, if only I had worked harder, if only I had done more.
That's right.
And, and that I can't help but think, when people of color say, before you blame anybody else, point a finger at yourself, how much of that is really due blame on yourself. And it really isn't a system, because we know that for African American communities, before the Fair Housing Act in 1968, we know that there was a lot of redlining that happened, and where we would, where people were separated. Black people lived on the black side of town, white people lived on the white side of town, and Black people, it didn't matter if they had the money or if they had the opportunity to buy a house on the white side of town, developers would kick them out, or even just to buy a house at all. Now, what that happens is that's inheritance money, because, a property is worth, nowadays $200,000. That house that was $50,000 back then, or $30,000 back then, is $200,000. That's a lot of wealth that's passed down.
All right. What's your question?
So we can see, so my question is, are you sure that pointing a finger at yourself is always the first place to point that finger? Or how much of it is actually systemic?
I don't think that he made that statement because we're overlooking the system and the challenges that we're faced. I think he made that statement because, as having a father, no matter what background you come from, he instilled that resiliency in you to allow you to thrive.
Well, it's great character. I totally agree with you there. That's a great thing for a father to teach a son, because it helps him control what he is in control of. But that's the thing. Are you sure you're not falling into a fallacy where everything is your fault? And there isn't, because we know just from looking at history that we have a lot of systemic issues with minority groups in this country.
All right, let's go, Dr. Keith.
Right. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. I agree. I think you're right. I think it's almost a combination of both. We do have some real hardcore issues that speak to a legacy of growing up poor, in poverty. You guys, you touched a little bit about a legacy of poverty, or the lack of home ownership, and redlining. And that's very real. I mean, the 1968 Fair Housing Act, really one of the last real big issues that Dr. King fought for, essentially was passed after his death. But the Fair Housing Act really dealt with that issue, because that's when Dr. King in 1967, 68 moved to Chicago to demonstrate poverty in the North, and to showcase that there were so many people living in dilapidated, rundown apartment buildings, and banks would strategically not loan money to Black families in certain neighborhoods, and restricted Black families to the inner city, and the suburbs were reserved for white folk. Dr. King used to often say that you should be able to live wherever your money will allow you to live.
He's a capitalist.
Nat King Cole moved to Hancock Park. Great singer Nat King Cole in the 50s and 60s, and they loved, the people in his community loved his music. But when he showed up with a moving truck and moved into one of the mansions, they had a, for lack of a better phrase, a nervous breakdown. So this has always been a problem. And you want to be able to pass on economic wealth to your offspring. So home ownership is very important, and so is education. And that's really part of the American dream: home ownership and education.
Do you think there's been a breakdown between the Nat King Cole generation of African Americans and today's generation? Because it seems to me that there wasn't as much crime, low materialistic stuff like tennis shoes and stuff. I think it was Chris Rock that once said the most dangerous streets in America are named MLK Jr. streets, and it kind of ruins the legacy of Martin Luther King. Now, this is, a white guy asking, but,
right.
What has happened to, why after all these decades, you would think that as it's gotten more fair that the black community, especially in the 80s and 90s, would have rose up. Now you're starting to see a massive boom into the middle class of the black community. I think that's evident by Dr. Key, just so many black men that I know that own businesses now. Hood Samaritan, shout out.
Well, I think we still have, the gap between the haves and the have-nots in America is still wide. And it's not just African Americans who are dealing with issues of poverty and poor education, but poor whites, Latinos as well. So it's still a big problem. And part of it is education, access to education, quality education, and access to home ownership and good paying jobs. And if you don't allow individuals to, or if people aren't able to take advantage of those three areas, then it's going to be pretty difficult for them to really experience the American dream. And so education is extremely important. We still need to overhaul our inner city schools.
How much money are you going to throw at inner city schools? Dave Adams wrote, whose fault is it? These cities have been under Democratic control for 50, 60 years. Cleveland, Detroit, right. Flint, Saginaw. I'm naming all the Michigan ones. I'm from Michigan. Baltimore, where I'm at. Baltimore was starting to come up, and then they had the riots, and it's been down ever since. Yeah. How can you go ahead?
But to rebuild, our schools, to rebuild our to job development programs, that's not a Democratic problem. That's an American problem. And so what we have to do is stop looking at those issues as being exclusively issues that Democrats are going to be the experts at in terms of solving. That's an American problem, because when one of us rises, all of us rise. Exactly. So we all have to embrace the issue of whether it's lack of good quality health care, lack of quality education. One of the things that COVID-19 did was expose some of the vulnerabilities that we have in our nation. And so we've got to begin to look at these issues as being kind of American issues that all Americans need to solve. And part of it is we can't run to our corners. Now, when I worked on the Hill in the 90s, I was a victim of really looking at the Republican Party as the other, or them, or those guys. Now that I'm far removed from that, it's solving these issues. Our political leaders, you've got to meet in the middle. You got to give and take. And change happens in the middle. Not to the far left, not to the far right.
You're 100% right.
So
go ahead. Yeah, Jasper. I'm going to let each of you guys have 30 seconds to go.
Go ahead, because I want to interject real quick. But go ahead, Jasper. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just going back to what Natalie said and harping on a little bit on what the doctor said. I don't want to confuse equality with equity. And her statement about what Gabriel said, what his father told him, if something goes wrong, first point the finger at yourself. I believe in that statement. I believe that we are all masters of our own destiny. We're all able to pull our bootstraps up, go to work. If we're healthy, we're able to go to work and make our own living. Some success, sometimes we'll fail, but we all have the responsibility to do that. Her statement about the Housing Act, because we were all equal. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution gave us all equal rights under the law, right? We're all equal. But it wasn't an equitable situation, because Black schools in the South did not have the same school books, curriculum as white schools. You know what I'm saying? So what these laws contributed And as a libertarian, this is where I'm kind of a borderline conservative for libertarian, is because I agreed with the government stepping in and I agree with the government stepping in and creating an equitable situation for everybody so everyone could eventually rise up together. That's where the line was drawn, was with those civil rights laws, the fair housing laws. Those laws gave everybody an equitable ability to rise up together. Go ahead,
Yeah, we're looking at 40-something years. Go ahead, Kareem.
I just believe we truly have lost focus. You know, it is an American issue, American problem, and Black people need to understand that we are Americans. This is our country. We're not going back to Africa. This is our country. This is where we belong. Our ancestors put the blood, sweat, and tears to build this country. So we need to understand this is us. This is part of us. And the reason why I say we need to stop making excuses is because one thing Obama showed us by becoming president is if you truly want to rise and do what you got to do, you can do what you got to do and become successful in this country. He made it to be the president of this country. He wasn't rich. He didn't have wealth. He had to work hard. His wife, the same thing. If you go watch his wife documentary, she grew up in South Side Chicago, poor. Her own counselor, her school told her, "You're not going to be able to go to Princeton," and she was able to do that. So.
And he's part of a single mom too. So you know that's why I don't want anybody to think I'm castigating single moms. I think as a whole, I'm going to give Gabriel 30 seconds.
I allow my boys to make an excuse.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Gabriel, go ahead, and then I got to read this comment that's on, and then we'll go to Natalie for a question after the comment. Go ahead.
So one of the issues I see in the Hispanic community, I don't know if it extends to the Black community as well, but part of it, I believe, is a culture. I know growing up, a lot of the times, we, like, at least as a police officer, I was always around. They see police officers, oh, look, be careful, there's a police officer there. Or, don't do this, do that. We create a negative culture for ourselves, and it perpetuates all the time. And so the problem I have with the Hispanic culture, we never want to break the mold. We're so content to stay where we are. We never want to, we don't want to, see what's out there. And that's the problem I have. So when I'm out there patrolling, I go to these schools and I take the time to talk to these kids or kids that we're about to take to jail. I'll ask them, hey, why are you doing this? I have these hard, honest conversations with them. Why are you doing this? And you know what they tell me? They tell me this is all I know.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking.
And what do you think is, they found like in studies where you have 2-parent homes that typically you're more involved with your students' education. You go to more parent-teacher conferences, all that stuff. But when you're a single mom, you're trying to work 2 jobs to put food on the table, or a single dad, you don't have that time to invest in your kids' education. So you're wholly dependent on people who never really cares about your kids. I mean, they say they do, but nobody cares about their kids like a parent does. Kathleen says, as a rhetorical question, Kathleen says, who does the systemic breakdown of the Black family start with? Anybody feel the government system is responsible for causing this? It's been happening for decades, attempting to make the Black father irrelevant and thwarting the Black 2-parent home. By the way, Kathleen is, I know her from work. She is half African-American. And she also says, Kareem, clap, 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 clap. So that's for you. Shout out. Natalie, you got a question?
I just wanted to go back to the schools because you guys brought up the schools. I didn't really get to say anything. The schools, inner city schools, and more urban, more on the outskirts, like suburban white schools, are markedly different. And the reason why they're markedly different is because where does your property taxes go?
That's right.
Schools. So that's why whenever you see, like you drive through neighborhoods where they're real big houses and real nice, if you drive around the corner and you get to their school, they have a real nice school too. And that is because property taxes go to that. So when you have the inner cities, which still are, predominantly you have people of color in the inner cities, what do you think, and because of redlining through the past, because this is a generational thing, what do you think the schools are going to look like? And that's
a self-eating.
There is still a line down the middle between the quality of Black education and brown education and white education.
But it's a self-eating snake. It's a self-eating snake. You have these inner city schools with poor education because of the lack of jobs. But when these kids go through these schools with poor education, there are not many jobs for them to get. So they can't move to the suburbs to get better jobs because of the poor education in the inner city schools. That's why I say it's not an equitable situation. They're all equal. They're all getting. They're all getting education.
I got you. Michelle Obama went to Bryn Mawr Elementary School in the heart of Chicago, rough neighborhood, and made it to prison. We have slaves that taught themselves how to read when no one wanted them to read. How powerful is that? No education, no schools. They had to sneak and teach themselves how to read. We have lost focus on what we need to do. I think that we have came so far that we feel that we have made it, and we still have to grow as a people. We have not made it. But the thing is, we don't have those leaders like we used to, like a Martin Luther King or a Malcolm X.
You got Dr. Key.
And how many
Well, let's the forefront of going back and guiding our people and leading our people.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Key, go ahead.
Well, I one comment, one more.
Sure, go ahead.
My apology. And I made a comment to Natalie on one of our shows that I feel that as Black people, I'm not just here just to talk about Black people, but these are some of the issues we're discussing, that Obama would have did more for Black people as a leader in the community than president. And the reason why I said that is because he could have led us to another place. And that it's just so much. But go ahead, sir.
No, it's a good point. And I appreciate all the wisdom that's out here. Just quickly about Obama. So Obama, one of his challenges, and he totally understood this, is that he was the president of the United States of America and not president of Black America. So your civil rights organizations, NAACP, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, other Black-based organizations, fraternities and sororities, and your African American church, we had to be in the community pushing and bringing change that way. So he was certainly not the president of Black America. And so he could never wear that hat. But I think it goes back to what I heard someone say earlier, a phrase I remember hearing growing up in Los Angeles in the Crenshaw district was, the only people who can save us from us is us. So there certainly is a level of responsibility that we have to ourselves and to our community. No doubt about it. We're standing on the shoulders of our ancestors who died depending on us. And so we do have huge responsibility that we must embrace and do for ourselves what others cannot or will not do for us. That's very important. But we also live in a society that has responsibility as well. And so our lawmakers, our leaders, our president, that everyone, this has to be a joint enterprise. You can't have a nation where one group rises and the other group does not. It just creates, and I know, we can look at, that's capitalism. That's how it works. You got some are going to make it, some aren't. But let's look at the virus. But this is one time in world history where everybody is speaking the same language. Everybody is impacted the same way. And certainly in some cases, we find in the United States, African Americans dying in disproportionate numbers. But we're all impacted by it. And we all need each other. And the only way we're going to get out of this is for us to work together like we do in the military. We may come from the suburbs, from the hood. We may come from the country. But when we get down in that foxhole, one fight, one team. And we've got to get back to that spirit of one fight, one team. It is perfectly okay to have Republicans and Democrats. I wish we had more a multi-party system in our nation. The Republicans are not the boogeyman, and neither are the Democrats. And we've got to stop looking at each other that way and try to find a way to look at each other in a way that I acknowledge who you are, I acknowledge what you stand for. Please do the same for me. The reason why African Americans run to the Democratic Party is because they feel more comfortable in the Democratic Party.
Why?
The Democratic Party is a bigger tent. So if you go to the last Democratic convention, the first Democratic convention I ever went to was 1992, the election of Bill Clinton. And one of the things I noticed, and you contrast that to the Republican Party convention, is that in the Democratic Party, you've got lottie-dottie and everybody. You got Black, white, Latino, Asian, Hispanic, gays, straight. You got everybody there.
Mhm.
In the Republican Party, not so much the same.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of tension. There's a lot of push and pull at a Democratic National Convention because you have so many viewpoints, so many people trying to push their agenda forward. And it's the opposite in the Republican Party. That does not mean that people of color should become members of the Republican Party. They should, but they got to feel welcome, and they got to have an agenda. The same agenda I have as a Democrat in the Democratic Party. My number one goal is, what are we going to do to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and heal the sick? And we need to do that and challenge both parties to do that. Now, we may do it differently, but as a nation, we both need to do that.
Yeah, you just touched on a very fundamental difference between. So the Republicans are often accused of hating the poor, hating the sick, and hating the naked, I guess you'd say. But what we say is, hey, teach a man to fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. Whereas the Democrats seem, and this sounds very skeptical, but Democrats sometimes feel like they're actually just giving them food, giving them that, and they don't want them to be self-reliant because then they lose that vote. Because the longer I can get James Key to need me in power, the longer I can count on his vote to keep me in power. The minute he becomes self-sufficient, then he's all of a sudden looking at his tax bill and saying, hey, wait, if I can learn to do it, why can't they learn to do it? Go ahead.
Well, I don't think the Republican does not care about the poor. I actually think they do. I think we have a different strategy in terms of how we empower the poor. And I don't think the Democrats have a monopoly on solving problems for the poor. The big challenge for politics is that you got to be able to loosen up a little bit. And as long as we stay in our corners, as long as we stay to the far left and the far right, we're going to continue to have massive political gridlock. And that's what we have right now in Washington, D.C., gridlock, and nothing gets done.
All right.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to read a comment. Dean, there's a little lag, so sometimes if I'm cutting you off, it's not me really cutting you off. I'm trying to take up for that lag. Dean Williams says, first he made up a point, hey, we need to start exercising our Second Amendment right to make them think twice before shooting. Dean looks like he's...
my brother.
That's your brother? Okay, is he in New York? And then he says social programs are created to make people self-sufficient. I disagree with you, Dean, there. I'll let Jasper go ahead and answer that. I think social programs are always born out of good intentions, but they end up having an addictive quality to them. Go ahead, Jasper, if you want to answer. I know you guys probably had this debate over a kitchen table.
Well, social programs are meant to be a hand up, not a handout. So when they implemented the New Deal. The New Deal came out during the Great Depression. It was meant to give people a hand up because everybody was down. The stock market was down. There wasn't a lot of food. So the government was meant to temporarily have an income tax, a federal income tax, to help stimulate the economy, to help stimulate growth, and give people a hand up. However, with these social programs, just like the welfare programs, all that, people get addicted to it. People get hooked on the free stuff, that people become less self-sufficient and less able to decide for themselves. And that's how the government gets you to do what they want, pretty much. The welfare system is broken, and I don't want to go too far into that, but it's broken because when a single mother, and I've seen it, can make more money staying home with her children than going to work at whatever level job she can get at McDonald's or whatever, then it's broken, because therefore you're not motivating her to become self-sufficient. You're motivating her to become more and more dependent. And she knows that the more children she has, the more money she will get.
Well,
and unfortunately, go ahead.
Not just that. I had people on the last round where I think it was born out of good intentions, but the Democrats, and they're doing it this time too, where they're adding an automatic $600 instead of just attach it to the rate of your wages were before the virus hit. A lot of people are now competing against the unemployment system because they're saying, well, hey, even if I could get $900 a week not working at all versus $1,100 but I have to put in 40 hours, I'll stay home and do the $900 because I don't have to pay for childcare. I don't have to pay for, commute time. And, well, I kind of like getting up in my PJs at 11 a.m.
But you see, I think most people, I think the big misnomer is that most people want to get up and go to work. Most people want to be able to provide for their family and children. And this is all over the world. I saw the same dynamic when I lived in Korea for 2 years, in Japan. Most people want to earn a living and to do it and to look themselves in the mirror and really feel like they are contributing to society and providing for their family members. And I think that cuts across racial lines. I do not think that most people. I lived in a community where I truly believe that I watched people have really basic jobs of being maids or janitors, and really do well with their money and provide for their family, send their kids off to school, pinching pennies, doing everything they could to make it happen for their family members. And this whole notion of sometimes we kind of cast people who are on social service a certain way, and it creates a negative stigma. But most people on social service or receiving food stamps or who are on welfare don't want to be on welfare forever. They want to get off and they want to move forward in life. That's what I believe.
Well, so, and I would almost agree with you, except for human nature takes over, because and this is not black or a white or a brown thing. This is a human nature thing. If you look at government employees, and I know we've all seen them, because they're so protected by their union, you have a few that really love to get to work and get it done. You have a whole lot that do just enough to get by because it's so hard to fire them. Now, I'm not going to put that out on the whole thing. Dean Williams says, FDR, imagine being able to get good pay and blue job after World War II. You could use that to help get your family started. Guess who they would not allow to get those jobs? Blacks. Totally agree with you. That's why affirmative action was needed for a while. I don't think it is anymore. Go ahead, Gabriel. You were about to say something?
I was. So kind of you guys were talking about already. I do think that the welfare system does incentivize single parent familyhood, single parent households. And I think that is a big issue in both the brown and black community. I mean, Kareem was talking about it earlier. You got a single parent mother. She has 2 or 3 kids. If she decides to get married, she's going to get substantially paid less, and she's living in subsidized housing, right? I wouldn't blame her for wanting to remain there. Back to what Doctor was saying. I don't disagree with you. I do agree that people do want to go to work, but the problem with the welfare system is it does incentivize them to remain in single parent family households, and that is an issue in both communities, in all communities.
And it's fastest growing in the white community. Single parenthood is on a shoot up to the white community, and I tell my own peers, look, we need to fix our own self too, because guess what? We've been on the high horse all this time, but we're moving to where we are. Single parenthood is rising, and we're getting poorer as a thing. You know who's overtaken is the Asians, and you know I'm assuming that they'll get westernized too, and they'll have a high single. You know, it's kind of a cyclical thing, but this is not a racial thing. This is an American thing and a worldwide thing. They're experiencing in Europe too.
That's right.
But that leads to other problems too. I mean, there was a study done in the 1990s. It was a project on human development in Chicago neighborhoods. I think it was done in the 1990s. And so it went over two major issues. So it talked about the social development perspective and the life course perspective. And one of the findings in the study was the violence was the result of developmental issues versus environmental factors. So, and what that says is interpersonal relationships are key in developmental years of children. And so that's what I think single family households is an issue in all communities.
Well, you got 2 sets of hands. You got 2 breadwinners. You got, my wife and I, we tag team on our kids. I mean, she goes to work. She works for the Veterans Affairs. I work now. Right now I'm working from home because of the virus. But, we have to coordinate. We also have her father living with us. It takes a lot to raise a kid. In fact, Hillary Clinton said it takes a village. No, really, it takes 2 parents and a close family knit. And then as a backup, the village. And that's the problem with, I think, the Democrat Party is they've gotten too reliant on the village, the government, and not enough on 2-parent homes.
The family unit.
And Kareem's a big proponent of this. That's why I love he's one of my favorite soldiers I ever had, besides you, Dr. Key. You're great too. He's all about fatherhood initiatives. And that's what I loved about Obama. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it is important. But remember how people wind up. They don't wind up in poverty, in a vacuum. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We're talking about poor quality education. We're talking about starting a race, and they say go, and everybody's running, and you're still at the starting line. You kind of start a race, you kind of get thrown in, and people have already been running. And so you just don't wind up on food stamps and on welfare. Something took place to get you there. And you may be the offspring of a legacy of a lack of home ownership, and that's no excuses, and it's not an excuse. excuses are monuments of nothing that build bridges that lead to nowhere. And those who specialize in them seldom succeed in anything they do. But we have to keep it. Yeah, we've got to keep it real and almost be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. So as we empower ourselves in our communities, whether it's white, whether it's Hispanic or Black, we do empower us. We must empower ourselves. We must be self-sufficient, but I can't tell a man to pull his bootstraps up if he doesn't have any boots on. And so we're telling people, you got to pull yourself up, pull your bootstraps up, but you don't have any boots on.
But how long, Dr. Key, do we provide boots? Using that metaphor, there's got to be a limit to where, okay, hey, yeah, we did some shitty things in America. Stuff that I'm not proud of, that I didn't do, my dad didn't do, but it was my dad and my father-in-law who actually was born already when Black people couldn't use, and a lot of us white people, we forget that that's pretty recent history. That's more recent than World War II, which we always make movies about still. Got it. Right. But at what point? Is it 2040, 2080? When do we quit giving boots out and then depend on people? It's kind of like being in Afghanistan. I mean, how long are we going to be there rebuilding their country before they're finally going to have their own police force? I mean,
for Afghanistan, that's true. For America, it means that we do this. This is part of our heritage, part of our history. We're always going to have some level of responsibility for the least of these. You judge a society based on how well it treats its elderly and its young people. Mm-hmm. So we will always have this as a part of our narrative. We cannot escape it. There is no end date. What we have to do is look at our institutions and find ways to improve home ownership, good paying jobs, stimulate our economy, and build better schools and take care of our inner city schools and give kids a choice. We've got to do a better job at that. And at the same time, we have to take personal responsibility as well. We cannot divorce ourselves from personal responsibility. I was raised in a single parent home. My mother was a school teacher in Los Angeles, inner city of LA for 35 years. And I saw a lot of dynamic and wonderful things in the Crenshaw district. And just because you were born, when I was executive director of Sojourners Neighborhood Center in Washington, D.C., nonprofit academic cultural enrichment center, we used to tell our young people, just because you were born in the hood doesn't mean the hood is in you. Just because your mama was a prostitute and your daddy a pimp, you can rise and be an angel if your mind is made up. Amen. So it is possible in this great nation of ours. There are many stories of people who were raised by a single parent who did well. Is it better to have two parents in the household? Absolutely, yes.
And it's possible to, and remember, we're talking in a macro. I said not all smokers get lung cancer.
Right. You said that.
Let me read some comments real quick, and then I'm going to go to Kareem next, and then Jasper. I'm getting beat up on the Village, saying, yes, I know the Village was not really meant to be the government. They were talking about doctors, teachers, etc. Thank you, Amber. Families, teachers, bus drivers, neighbors, friends. Thank you, Samantha. I can count on my most loyal fans to correct me when I've overstepped. Dean, I'm going to have to get Dean on this show to debate Jasper, I think, someday, but he said it was a good book. I remember a time when I got in trouble at school, and everyone on the block gave me a whooping. I'm not for whoopings because my dad kind of took it a little too far, but I do believe that every parent, every person needs to get involved. There's no snitching when it comes to watching out for other people's kids. Use the reparation funds to provide those funds to create those opportunities for those communities. I'd be down for a discussion on that, but it would have to be very targeted and wouldn't just be cash handout, because we have to teach people what to do with money before you give them money. That is, you invest 10%, you tithe 10% or give 10%, you live on 80% or whatever it may be, so that you have that legacy to hand down to your kids. I want to go to Kareem, and then I want to go to Jasper. Go ahead, Kareem.
Okay. The thing is, and people might say, because I speak this way all the time, my people might say I'm very hard on us. The reason why I say that is, by being a recruiter in the Army for over 12 years, working in so many different communities, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, and Florida, what I learned is right now we have so many opportunities available to us, and the doctor pointed out on, but we're not taking the opportunity to utilize those opportunities. They're there. We can go to college. We can join the military. It was a time that we couldn't even serve.
It's true.
We couldn't even go to the same schools. But I'm just so upset with my people. I have the right to be, because I come from there and I'm part of them, because it seemed like we regressing instead of progressing. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why. I really don't. We don't want to go to school. we don't value education. We don't value being fathers. And we can't, we talked about all the stuff that took place in the past. Today, they're here. Yeah. Let these chains come off our brains and this slavery that we still captivate and go out there and take advantage of these opportunities that's available to us. Stop. It happened to us. It's done.
I think you're onto something there, but you're seeing that a lot. Like the older civil rights leaders, not the older ones that actually fought for civil rights. But I'm talking Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, the perpetual blame everybody else crowd. And Bill Cosby, even though he turned out to be a dirtbag in prison, but he had a lot of good things to say in the 90s and was castigated by the black community for it. But now you're seeing a lot more men say the exact same things, Jasper. Steve Harvey, he's a big proponent of, hey, get up and get out and do something. Find your talent and go get it. Dr. Key, that's one thing that he and I always was able to talk to a lot. You, Kareem, you have a great message, and I think that's becoming more mainstream. Go ahead, and then we'll let Jasper in.
You say there is a lot of black men saying it, but it's not the right black men that's saying it, and that's the difference. The ones that we look up to, as I say, as a whole, the black community, the artists, the rappers, the athletes, those are the ones that have the platform to really take us to that next step. But they're not taking that sacrifice to make these type of statements. They're not stepping up like Muhammad Ali and throwing his career away because that's what he believed in. For example, real quick, when Donald Sterling got caught up with all that LA Clippers stuff and saying things behind closed doors, it came out. I believe that was the perfect time for the black athlete to say, we're not playing another basketball game until this guy is gone. But no, they still, it was the middle, they still suited up and played. And to me, we took a step back. That was our opportunity. Instead of marching and preaching and protesting, let's take action.
Jasper?
I think the conversation.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. King.
We've had this conversation, sometimes I think, so yes, has this conversation been going on in the African American community about self-help? Yes, it goes back all the way back to Booker T. Washington, and that was his whole philosophy. Black preachers have been saying this for years in our community about, empowering yourself, helping yourself. This conversation is happening, but we've always been able to have this conversation on one hand, and the nation, I'm not a member of the Nation of Islam, but that has been kind of their rap too. Okay. Do for yourself what others can't do for you. And that was one of the positive aspects about the Nation of Islam, how they were able to take brothers off the street and build them up, clean them up, and make men out of them. And that's
something the church should have been doing, by the way.
The church was doing that. The church has always been doing that. Yeah. But you can't reach everyone with the same fishing rod, and so you're going to use different bait for different folk. My whole point has always been, I think in the African American community, we've always had that rap. We've always talked about that. But you can never let society off the hook, because when the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed, it didn't just benefit Black people, it benefited all people. The 1965 Voting Rights Act wasn't just for Black people, it was for all people. And people are still benefiting off of those very important pieces of legislation. The 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education Act, that benefited everyone. And so when one of us rises, all of us should rise. And so if African-American people kick a door down in the 60s, guess what? Everybody walked through it. And so there are more doors that we need to continue to kick down. Government, society has a responsibility. They got to live up to that responsibility. We've got to work together to, if we really want to make America great again, we've got to work together to make that happen. If we want America to be what Ronald Reagan talked about, the shiny city on a hill, we've got to work collectively as a joint enterprise to make our nation a better union.
Well said.
Dr. Key, what do you think is holding us back? Do you think it's a messaging issue? Or do you think it's a priorities issue?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that we have become so paralyzed by our political philosophies, and we're irrevocably connected to our ideology, that we can't loosen up and exhale and say that in order to get, you've got to give a little bit. And so our our political leaders. We see this played out every single day on Capitol Hill. It's gridlock, and it's hard to get. We should have an infrastructure bill in place, putting people to work.
Amen. I think we can all agree on that.
And we don't have it.
But that's because of politics, like what you said at the beginning, where some people are so us versus them, get together. It's just like, you know what? The immigration bill. And I'm giving Trump props here. I know everybody's going to say, oh, of course you are. But no, for real. I beat on Trump a lot because of his message, if you ever watch the show. But one thing he says, hey, you know, I'll give citizenship to the DACA recipients, the ones that need it, right? As long as you give in on some of my priorities. That's called compromise. We used to do it. Bill Clinton was the master of compromise. In fact, he was against originally welfare reform, but then when he got his stuff into it a little bit, he actually owned it and said, "Hey, I signed that." You know, that was Bill Clinton.
He did. And he did. And we watched Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, who was Speaker of the House,
there you go,
Democrat, and Ronald Reagan, the great conservative from California, governor of California. They had to find ways to work together.
We don't do that anymore.
That's correct, and that's the challenge. If you're a Republican and you know and I'm a Democrat, we both agree that, you know what, here's some common issues that we both agree upon. Now let's work together to try to solve those problems. And politicians, and you do have a few politicians on the Hill who are doing that on both sides of the aisle, working together, but not enough. But if you're willing to come into the debate knowing that I'm not going to get everything, but I'm going to get some things. And if both parties, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or independent, it doesn't matter. We have to get to the point when we're not so paralyzed by political philosophy, but driven more by the need of humanity that stares us in the face every single day.
Okay, let's hold right there 1 second. Let's everybody take a break. I'm going to do a station identification because I need to go over some notes.
Where politics meets common sense. This is Nightcaps with Nate.
All right, so if you just joined us, this is Nightcaps with Nate. We are on a special 2-hour edition of the show. I know usually we'd be over by now, but a lot of people have just joined us. If you have not yet followed or liked this page, please do so. Nightcaps with Nate is a growing thing where we present both sides of the aisle almost every single night. Tonight we have Dr. James Key. Raise your hand because it's a thing there. He is a Howard University grad. Used to work for Maxine Waters as a staffer. Guy's got a PhD. I could go on and on and on about this guy. Great leader. We have Kareem Jackson. Raise your hand. He is Republican now. He is Black Republican from the inner city of Chicago. We've got Gabriel. Raise your hand. Gabriel is a police officer in a major city. His union has asked us not to put in there. He is libertarian, so he kind of errs on the conservative side, as well as Jasper. Raise your hand. He is a Georgia Bulldogs fan, currently living outside Chicago, where his wife is stationed in the military, and he is a conservative libertarian as well. My name is Nate. I am the host of this show. If you have not gone to YouTube, please subscribe. We only have 10 slots left, and then once we get to 100 subscribers, which even though we get 3,000 viewers a night, I can't get to 100 subscribers, we're actually going to do a drawing for $100. So, Dr. Key, if you have not subscribed yet, put your name in that bucket. I want to read a couple of the comments there. Carrie Daniels said, hey, would you rather have two parents in the home where one is a dick or have one parent that sacrifices? Again, Bill Clinton became president of the United States under a single mom. President Obama became a president of the United States under a single mom. It can be done. What we're talking about is in the macro. Not every person that smokes is going to get lung cancer. However, we do still tell kids, hey, don't smoke, because a good percentage of them are. So we're talking in macro policy here. Dave Adams wants to know essentially what I want to know, and I'm going to start this hour off with this. Dr. Key, why should the Democrats, after all these years, why should they still get the black person's vote? In 2 minutes or less.
I think the Democrats have done just to really keep it as a young folk would say, keep it 100. They've done a better job at courting black people, the African American vote. The Republicans still have a lot of work to do, and I know they've made some gains. President Trump likes to highlight certain things that he's done for the African American community, but the Republicans have a lot of work to do. It's an uphill climb. It's not going to happen overnight.
No, it's not.
So They gotta, take it step by step.
Other
And the
comments?
Democrats yep.
I'm sorry.
No,
There's a lag. Other
Yeah.
comments, Kathleen, wish we'd get to the point where it's less about being Democrat, Republican, more just about being American. I haven't seen that since 9/11. But guess what? When you got two parties with two very different visions vying for power, you're never going to have harmony. Fortunately, we are a constitutional republic. We are not a direct democracy. Otherwise, we would have all the parties like in Europe where they all have to come together and form a coalition government. Does Dr. Key want to be in office? Samantha Marks. I've always said that he's going to end up running for office eventually, but he's got a little bit of a military career left. So are you going to run for office eventually? 10 seconds or less. Go
Sure,
ahead.
absolutely. So, after my military career, I do want to get back into public service, and I have strongly considered that. And so that's something that's high on my list once I retire.
Okay, and there was another one from Dean. He said that this will all happen, talking about black empowerment, especially in the homes, when our heroes, and I agree with this 100%, I brought this up about the popular culture, both on the right, left, and in the Hispanic culture. When our heroes become people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Katherine Johnson, and not Beyonce and Jay-Z. I think that we have...
I agree with that.
I mean, that's what happened in the days when we aspired to be astronauts, man. When kids, both black and white, they watched the first landing on the moon, my dad said, and every kid wanted to be an astronaut. We're not looking up to heroes like that. I think the black community, maybe not politically, but aspirationally, should look up President Obama, as Kareem has said. You could find heroes even if you don't agree with 100% of their philosophy.
Yeah, but I don't really knock Jay-Z or someone looking up to them. You got to understand, most people, like even Michael Jordan is special. He said when he was playing basketball, he didn't believe that he was a political activist or should take a side. He just wanted to be a basketball player. A lot of artists, musicians, or people of celebrity status, they don't get to those positions because they have the conscious mind to understand that they have a responsibility to their people. We had some like Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali and those. So, but once they get there and they realize that and they start changing, like I see a lot of Jay-Z and Beyonce, they do a lot of prison reform and helping communities, then we should embrace them.
You got a point there. Kanye West and Kim Kardashian's the one that talked to Trump about prison reform. And, that's another example where I think Trump is kind of a Democrat. You can still see some of his old New York progressive roots. Gabriel. I don't want to call you Gabe because when I was young, there was a kid named Gabe the Babe, and I just don't look at you that way, okay? But, Gabriel, who's your hero? Who do you look up to? And I know if we're Christians, we're going to say God, Jesus, Muhammad, whatever. But who is earthly?
It's always been my dad.
Your dad?
It's always been my dad.
So you have somebody to look up to. What in 20 seconds or less, what do you look up? What do you want to be more like your dad? In what way?
So my dad has always been, for me, the definition of perseverance. So my dad has been legally blind his entire life. I didn't know. Well, he was diagnosed with glaucoma later in life, but I think he has Stargardt's. So he was always losing his vision, but he never used that as a crutch. He went to work every day. He worked for over 20 years in a meat company in a freezer stocking meat. But he went to work every day, never complained. He was losing his vision every day, but he never once said, "Hey, look, I can't do this anymore," because he knew he had to provide and put food on the table for our family. And he still provided us with guidance every day.
Yeah.
So that's why my dad will always be my hero.
That's great.
Jasper.
It's great.
Who do you look up to?
I look up to my he used to be our youth pastor. Now he's just my mentor, Ross Cooper. He the short, bald white guy was our youth pastor, also / wrestling coach. But he was really one of the first white guys that showed me unconditional love, and he let me know that it wasn't a white versus black thing. I used to be uncomfortable about white people just because I grew up around all black people. I really didn't experience white people that much. So I used to be uncomfortable around white people. I used to think all white people hated black people. It's just the environment that I grew up in. And he really, took me in, changed my life, changed the course of my life, the trajectory of the choices I was going to make. And just showed me love. He didn't try to make me be somebody I wasn't.
Was he in Dean's life?
No, no. Me and Dean really just found each other.
Okay.
Our families kind of segmented and kind of. I was a foster child growing up, so we were all, and he's from my dad's side. He's my brother from my dad's side, and it's a lot,
Yeah.
But our family's all over the place. But yeah, me and Dean really last couple of years really just got back in touch, and we don't agree on a lot. He's more progressive, and I'm definitely not. But
we're praying for him, just like Dr. Key. We're praying for him.
Yes.
Kareem, go ahead, man. Give me 20 seconds. Who do you look up to and why? As a young black man, who did you look up to?
Hey, this is a great question, and I want to hear what the doctor has to say. But I would say it would be my stepdad, or his name is Robert Phelps. I won't call him my stepdad. He married my mom when I was about 8 years old, and my mom passed away when I was about 15. But anyway, for that time he came in my life, we grew up in the projects. We were poor, and we grew around drugs, gangs, violence, poverty, you name it. And this man took and raised me and my other two brothers. We wasn't his biological kids. He put his life on the line, gave us his last. And I had more fear for this man than anything that someone would try to have me to do on the street. And I believe that man sacrificed his life to give me the opportunities to do what I can to make it out the projects in the neighborhood. And that was a good thing, because a lot of kids, when I was growing up in my neighborhood, didn't have that. They was more scared of the gangbanger, the hustler. And I was like, man, there's no way that you're going to talk me into doing this, getting in a stolen car, selling some drugs, or gang banging. Because if my dad found out I'm doing this, it's worse than anybody out here could do. And that gave me the opportunity to have the life that I have today for my kids. So Robert Phelps, man, I love you, brother. And I hope I'm not letting you down for all your sacrifices.
No, you're doing good. Hey, go ahead, Dr. Key. Who as a young man did you look up to?
Well, let me just say to congratulate everyone, because these are some really great testimony coming from the panel. So all of the unknown, there were several unknown heroes and sheroes in my community that really inspired me. I start with my grandmother, Sweetie Pie, may she rest in peace, because she really taught me a lot of basic values. Made sure we were in church on Sunday morning. Before we left the house to go to school, we had to go into the prayer closet and say a prayer before we walked outside the door. She knew the streets out in the Crenshaw district can sometimes be unforgiving. And my great grandmother, who worked as a maid in Beverly Hills, I wrote an article, my first article that I ever wrote for USA Today newspaper. Was
I saw
her.
that. You showed it to me.
Wrote about her. Yeah. And so she worked as a maid. I keep her photo in my office desk, wherever. Doesn't matter what duty station I'm at, her photo is planted firmly on my desk. It keeps me grounded. It reminds me that someone had to sweep, someone had to clean toilets, someone had to catch the early bus to get to work. And then lastly, it's Mr. Smoot, the neighborhood gardener. He worked as a custodian for McDonnell Douglas company. And oftentimes he wanted to preach to young people. He always had something to say, but we didn't want to take him too seriously, because he kept a bottle of gin in his back pocket.
So hey, I got a glass of rum right here.
You got a glass of rum. So no one really wanted to listen to Mr. Smoot, because what could he possibly tell us? He had a 9th grade education. But one day he cornered me, and with tears in his eye, he said, "Look, young man, when you graduate from high school, that's my diploma." And he looked at my brother, who was a student at USC then, and said, "When you graduate from USC, that's my degree. Your success is my success. Yes, your failure is my failure." And he said, society may not get any better, but you got to get better. And it's his voice that still haunts me today. Whenever I feel like giving up, or whenever I feel kind of down, I think about his voice. I think about what he said. Society may not get any better, but you got to get better. Yes, and so that's my hero.
Okay, so great.
My heroes.
And
awesome.
The reason why I ask is I think everybody, when you're young, has somebody to look up to.
Hold on real quick.
Go ahead.
Did you tell us your hero?
Yeah, I was going to go. I have a couple. My dad, although he was a tough dad growing up. But you know what? The guy, we grew up very poor. He never let us know we were poor, because, it was just a thing. It was a shame thing almost. But he would literally walk. And if there was, the old saying, I walked uphill both ways, that would have been him. Yes. He actually would walk 2.5, 3 miles to get to work for a low-paying job so he could put food on the table. along with the welfare. He also taught me conservatism and how to make it for yourself and to never let life circumstances, teach you who you are. And I also give props to my mom. My mom taught me that just because you're poor doesn't mean you have to live like dirt. We had a very horrible, a poor house, but she kept it clean. So I give her props. And then of course, my community and churches and stuff, my leaders and mentors in the Army, Dr. Key, Chaplain Owama. I have a few really strong men that taught me, the other way of thinking. Now, you have never going to convince me to be a Democrat, but I can start seeing your side.
That's right.
Let me ask you this, because this is about the Black and the Hispanic community. What is it going to take to close the achievement gap without not necessarily throwing more money? Because per pupil prices, a lot of people don't realize that in the inner city, Baltimore, also Detroit, at least those for sure, they actually get more per pupil than a lot of the other school systems, but they also deal with a lot of more systemic issues because other school systems have very, well-off families, maybe even maids, So what's it going to take to close the achievement gap? I say it's marriage in the home, but of course you can't force people to get married. But what is it going to take? I mean, there's got to be a prescription. You write books. Go ahead, give us your 2-minute spiel.
Well, it goes back to the big idea, and I know that here's one area that's really important is when Bernie Sanders was talking about this debt and how many people are in college debt, how many people cannot afford to go to college, and that's a problem that we still have a system in place that where the haves continue to benefit and the have-nots don't. There's still a lot of young people out there who want to go to college and can't afford it. The cost of college is almost scandalous when you think about how it continues to rise and the kind of money that college presidents are being paid. We've got to close the gap. We've got to find a way to, and I don't know where we start. Is it that community college is free now? I know in some places they've done some
not free
things to make
taxpayer funded. Sorry, go ahead.
To make college affordable for all people. That to me is one great place to start.
But do you think we've overdone college? I mean, what about trade schools? Pushing trade schools.
Trade schools important too. I think you're right. I think we've got to be creative about how we look at our 2-year community colleges, how we program our young people coming out of high school. Maybe not everyone wants to attend a 4-year university. Is there some viable trade college they can go to and earn a salary that will allow them to live a life and raise a family? Yeah, we've got to get really creative in terms of how we look at our education system and make sure that everyone has access to it.
Eric Lee says it's not marriage. The whole marriage thing is ignoring root cause when it comes to school. It's just not about throwing money either. It's ensuring all students have a base level of support to get the best education in the world. That means pre-K through all education. I agree with you, Eric, except for you can't blame. I used to blame teachers. I used to be that one like, oh, well, hey, tithes are paid to merit and all that. And then you know what I realized? You can't give an adult 30 kids for 8 hours a day and expect them to do your job as a parent. Yeah. So a lot of this comes from the home. And, you see it on movie after movie even. If kid is out slinging drugs because he can't even put shoes on his feet, he's not going to be doing homework.
Yeah. But Nate, let me push back on this on you. Sure. Because you pivot always back to the home and there's never any responsibility in terms of the government's role. I hear you loud and clear about the home. I agree with you 100%. But I also say that, there's a role to play too, that we can't let our leaders off the hook as well, who are serving the public. Can't let them off the hook. It's a two-way street.
He's got a point. Stanford and Harvard did a study recently, and so in 1999, the number of Hispanics that graduated high school between the ages of 18 to 24, only about a third went to college. In 2016, that number was about 2/3. Just under 50%, which is great. But the problem was a lot of them were dropping out of college because they academically couldn't keep up. So the issue goes again back to Dr. He was saying was back in the schools. I mean, at some point we have to put a burden back on the system. I get it. The home life, it's
How do you blame a teacher? Imagine you being a teacher. You're already in an overburdened classroom, which maybe could be a government fix, more teachers, smaller classrooms, more male role models, maybe more teacher aides. But bottom line is that, it all is going to, unless the schools are going to take over the kid's life, which you're starting to see. They're doing 3 meals a day in Baltimore right now. I just don't know when do we say, hey, enough government and more personal responsibility? These are your kids. Raise them up right. I know that's
both. I think it's both, Nate. But you got to think too. So none of my parents. So my mom didn't graduate high school. My dad did some college when he was in Mexico. So I didn't really know what college was about. Graduating high school. So I didn't know how to apply for college or anything like that. It wasn't until I was in 10th grade, my geography teacher kind of started telling me how to apply to colleges, and he told me something I still remember to this day. So Mike Stackhouse, if you're listening, I'll never forget you. He said, if you couldn't get in the front door, meaning a 4-year college, try the back door or try a side door. So he's talking about JV colleges, and I think that's a great idea. I think that's something we have to push, because a lot of these Hispanics that are dropping out of college, they're in so much debt. And so that's
and a lot of the degrees are worthless.
That's right.
Correct. And they're going into, I'm not saying that all the degrees are terrible, but
no,
like you said, they're doing some of the humanities or something like that. But
and there are the IBEW sends me emails every day looking for work. The union, the trades union for concrete workers sends me things every day, even in this recession. And we have pushed college, when really over half of our jobs are trade school jobs that don't need college. They need a skills trade. Believe me. I don't need another accountant. I need an HVAC guy to fix stuff.
Those are the essential workers right now, right?
Yeah, they are the essential workers. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's right. Yep.
Jasper, were you gonna say something, or was it Kareem? I heard somebody chime in there.
You can let Jasper. Go. Go ahead, Jasper.
No, go ahead. I'm just listening right now.
Yeah, he's our quiet warrior.
I'm agreeing with a lot, and I'm disagreeing with a lot. But I'm waiting for my time to come in.
That question that you is a very good question, but it's a joint effort, because even if we have free college for everybody,
taxpayer funded,
however it gets, you have to go and take advantage of those opportunities again. So it's a two-way street.
And this is not just the inner cities, folks. I'm not talking, I'm throwing glass. I live in Appalachia, at the beginning of Appalachia, and if you watch the Wild and Wonderful Whites of Appalachia, you'll see that this goes deeper into the mountains and all that, where kids are not, their parents they come home, their parents have a needle in their arm and are unresponsive.
Yep.
Okay?
It's a cultural thing. Like, I grew up in Chicago, and my mom died when I was in 10th grade, and I moved to Dallas, Texas, and went to Lake Highlands High School, which is a prominent high school in Dallas, Texas, and it was like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. It was like going from streets of Philly to the Bel-Air, and I felt that way.
Sing the song.
I realized I come from Chicago, where kids graduate from 8th grade, and that was like, hey, you made it. And girls went to 9th grade, but they got pregnant and was dropping out.
And that's a problem too. Is this promiscuity in again in Appalachia too? We gotta stop these, and it's actually going down. So, we hear a lot of bad news because we're in a 24-hour news cycle, but a lot of this stuff is actually going down. Teenage pregnancies going down, and all that stuff, which is good.
Just to close out on that point,
sure.
That was the culture where I came from. Then I moved to Dallas, and I think that's why I joined the military. I moved to Dallas, and a high school in Chicago, you start off with 300 freshmen. The senior class might be 80. In Dallas, you start with 400. They graduating 396. And I realized it was just the culture. Though everybody was going to college, everybody was doing something. So when I got around that environment, that's when my thinking changed. I was like, hey, I just got this letter from Stanford. I just got this letter from Baylor. I just got this letter from Texas Tech. Oh, I'm going to the Marines. I'm going to the Navy. And I was like, dang. So I need to start planning to do something after I leave college. So it was the environment that shaped the thinking.
Yeah,
that's very powerful. That was very, very powerful. Had I not made that shift, I don't know, what my priorities would have been.
Yeah, I mean, the Detroit Public Schools had a 25% graduation rate. I mean, 75% didn't graduate. This was back in the 90s.
Schools too in Dallas. The environment was just a different breed.
All right, the quiet warrior, come on in, baby. You got a whole minute now because you've been silent. You've built up
Well,
time.
I do have a lot to say.
Go
Well,
ahead.
exactly what you're saying. The culture dictates the mindset. So right now, we live in a culture that's glorifying drugs, that's glorifying getting money, but it's not telling you how to get the money. It's glorifying sex. It's glorifying all of that. And as you guys said earlier, when I was skipped, school, but why don't we have the right heroes in the Black community? Why don't we have heroes that everybody looks up to and can follow succinctly? Well, it's easy because anytime somebody rises up and says something that makes sense and will get us out, you have this weight, this burden, this anchor of our community that denigrates them, that castigates them, that calls them out of their name, that calls them Uncle Tom and traitor, and oh, you're canceled. That's the big thing now. You're canceled because you would dare have the gall to challenge our backwards way of thinking, to make sense and say, hey, maybe Donald Trump is not so bad. Donald Trump is really helping the Black community. Donald Trump is a good president. I'm not saying, that's not me saying that. This is just what people have said that have been canceled. You look at Chrisette Michele, you look at Kanye West, you look at Steve Harvey, you look at Jim Brown. They canceled Jim Brown because he said Donald Trump was a good president. You know what I'm saying? As much things that Jim Brown has done for the Black community over the years, that you get mad at Jim Brown because he agreed with a president that you've been tricked and brainwashed to believe is racist and against you. That's ridiculous. The groupthink in the Black community, the Latino community, even some of the white community is ridiculous, and it's irritating. Sorry to get so passionate.
No, man, I've never seen you so fired up, baby. I was like, preach. Kathleen says, Kathleen Allman says, go Jasper, yes, but you're right. The cancel culture is a problem, and Bill Maher, who's a very liberal guy, actually my favorite liberal besides Dr. Key, he comes out about it all the time. The cancel culture has to stop because we need to share ideas. Just think about it. And if YouTube, this Plandemic, everybody told me to watch. I finally watched it today, folks. So yes, I watched Plandemic. Okay, don't agree with everything on it, but YouTube only made it more popular because they tried to cancel it, and Facebook only made it more popular because they tried to censor it. And the left is used to be the party of no censorship. Two Live Crew was the first rap group to come out and say, hey, why can't I play my music? Free speech, baby. That's me growing up right there.
Yeah.
But
it's showing your age.
The left has become a very big cancel culture of the modern day if you disagree with them. Think about this. If a doctor 40 years ago, 30 years ago said, hey, I don't believe that ulcers are only caused by stress, and he was laughed, today YouTube would block him as disinformation if there was a big ulcer crisis going on. Sure enough, come to find out, it's H. pylori is a bug, a bacteria that can actually survive stomach acid. The guy ended up getting a Nobel Peace Prize, but today he would have been canceled on YouTube and Facebook. And I agree with you. We need an open exchange of ideas. Period. Who wants to talk next? Let me read some. Share ideas, but hold everyone to the same level of accountability. Dean says, Eric Lee, nobody who is canceled has ever actually been canceled. Discuss. Well, if your platform is on Facebook or YouTube and they don't like your message, there's a lot of people that demonetize you or kicked you off. Candace Owens right now, because she wouldn't apologize to Twitter, is banned from Twitter. And she's a major figure in the Black community. By the way, James, have you heard Candace Owens?
Yeah,
in the Black community?
I wouldn't classify her as a major figure, but I think that she...
I'm sorry, major figure for the right of the small minority of Black people that are moving to the right. Yes, she started the Blexit movement.
That's right. And listen, and again, I don't think we should be one-dimensional. I don't think any group of people should be one-dimensional. We're not a one-dimensional nation. And so she has, every right to raise the right question based on what she believes. And there should be space in the, marketplace for Candace Owens, certainly in the Republican Party. And I'm less to demonize individuals because they have a different philosophy. I'd rather challenge the thought, but I don't want to, certainly demonize her. She's out there, but we are a society now that's kind of fixated on the showroom window and putting less emphasis on what's in the stockroom. And so, the showroom window looks nice. The shiny, sparkling object is always in the showroom window. But what's in the stockroom? By that I mean, let's talk about the substance, because that's where the nitty gritty is. It's in the substance. And So I think right now, in this moment of where we almost have a timeout in our nation, we've got to use this time very wisely and really begin to rethink a lot of things and rethink how we engage one another. Rethink how some of these issues we're talking about today are really right on point. How do we close the gap between the haves and the have-nots? What do we need to do to fix systems that are broken? And how do we do it collectively? And how do we refrain from name calling and demonizing and appreciating the other so that we can make our country great again? There's nothing wrong with that. But I think that, and so now's a perfect time. What better time to match this outbreak of a virus with an outbreak of some kindness, with an outbreak of some understanding, well, with an outbreak of a little unity. I know that sounds kind of pie in the sky, but really, if we're going to solve the perplexing issues of our time, we're not going to do it by running to the left and running to the right.
We are not. You're right. And it's going to be found in the middle. In fact, President Obama once said, President Obama's first term was actually kind of a moderate. He actually said that it's never as bad as it seems to be, never as good as it seems to be. It's always somewhere in the middle, and that's where you always find the answer. I don't know if y'all saw, but my cat decided to walk behind me on the thing. He's a black cat, so he probably blended in maybe, hopefully. Tolerance goes both ways, Samantha says. Dean, facts to facts, hearts to hearts, open mind to open mind. I love these conversations here because if I was having this conversation with anybody else with some of the questions that I asked on purpose, by the way, that are controversial, I'd have been called a racist, a bigot, and, you guys still say, he's just a good host maybe. What?
Dr. Key.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Dr. Key.
Yes. Yes, sir.
So you talk about that we need to generate new ideas. We need to get over the gap, as you say. There's a gap. Right. There's a disconnect. And I understand that you said the coronavirus has provided us a great opportunity to move forward and to come together.
Because as people. It's put all of us kind of in a holding frame. That's what I'm talking about. The holding frame.
So my question is, and I know it's on everybody's mind. Ahmaud Arbery. He's minding his own business. He, as a black man, I'm sorry, I can't separate my feelings political versus my feelings as a human being. Right. And as a black man from Georgia, mind you, I know that there are people out there, no matter how much time you give them, no matter how much education you give them, they're still ignorant, they're still hateful, they're still bigoted. And you have this individual, this young kid pretty much, who's just going out for a jog, minding his business, doing everything he should have been doing, not in anybody's business, not instigating any trouble, just minding his business, and he still lost his life in a country where we're taught that, everybody's your neighbor. Right. Reach out, touch somebody's hand.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. You know what? What I watched this country do these last few years, get upset about these police-related shootings, police shooting black kids and the white and all this, right? What I can't understand is, why do we not get upset about every death that an African American does to each other in our communities? Why we don't get outraged? Okay, so these two white people killed this young black man jogging. And I'm upset. It's bad. Is it just because he's a white? If it had been two black brothers that killed the black man, will we have that same upset? Or has our people become so numb to the genocide that we do to each other that we think is normal? If we're that passionate about Black Lives Matter, we should start in our communities. We kill each other over the stupidest things. Drive-by shootings, you ain't even shoot the people that you're shooting at. You just shot a 2-year-old kid sitting watching cartoons getting ready for school. I mean, when are we gonna start loving each other and protesting every time a black life is killed by another black life? Or is it just it only matters when a white person kills? Mm-hmm. I don't get that numbness to our people, and this is what I'm talking about. We need to wake up.
Yeah. Black on black crime, I'll be the first to talk about the challenges of black on black crime. As I grew up, with it, in it, experienced it, and it hurts. It's painful, and you're right. And I also know that I've heard as a pastor of a church in Smithfield, Virginia, years ago. I do see the tears. I've seen mothers cry and fathers cry over black on black crime. You're absolutely correct. So I hear you loud and clear, and I think you're absolutely correct. But that doesn't negate, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can. I'm sorry. I was talking to my producer / wife. Apparently, the feed was dropping in and out. Since everybody can hear me now, this is being recorded and it will be replayed in its entirety off YouTube. I will post a link so that because you guys did miss some great conversation from from Kareem, basically saying Kareem in 10 seconds or less. Basically, say what you're saying.
We need to react the same way when we kill each other as when a white person kills us. Our lives are precious no matter who's behind the gun. So that's what I was saying. Go ahead, Doctor.
Jasper, did you want to say something?
Jasper, you brought up a great point.
Say it again. Y'all breaking up. Say it again.
No, I was just saying we need to respond the same way when a black person is killed by another black person, when Hispanic is killed by another Hispanic. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes.
So,
We should have that same outrage. Every murder, we should have that same. It should go viral. It should be all of me. We should be feeling the same way when that takes place.
Well, I don't believe there's a such thing as black on black crime. I don't. I'm sorry, that's not a real thing. There's crime by vicinity, and unfortunately, people kill who they're close to. White people kill white people. Black people kill black people. That's not excusing the fact that those murders are wrong and incomprehensible and should never happen. My approach to this situation, I'm not talking about the cops killing, the kids, there are a couple more shootings this week that I'm not giving too much credence to until all the evidence comes out. I'm giving credence to the Ahmaud Arbery case is because of the intent, the mindset, and the hate that was involved in this case.
This goes back this goes back to my slides, because what we see on TV as white men growing up, not me, I grew up more in, in Flint, but even in Flushing or even everywhere else, you see cops. Was cops always running after a Hispanic or a black guy? Or sometimes a junkie, a white guy, which Dave Chappelle plays really well with a scratchy face. But, But that's what we see. So a lot of these people grow up to be cops, or they see something that's untowardly, like, hey, why is he running in my neighborhood? And they call the police. Well, guess what, folks? That's even if, let's just say that all the crime was committed by purple people. We'll make up a group called purple people. And all the crime, it would still only be like a very rare smidgen of purple people actually commit crime. 99% of them don't ever commit a crime in their whole entire life. So we got to get past this this media thing. I hear about Crenshaw where Dr. Key grew up. The only thing I knew about Crenshaw growing up was watching Boys in the Hood. So I thought, man, Dr. Key from Crenshaw, shoot, he's crazy, Mm-hmm. So a lot of that has to be a thing. Now, going back to what Kareem said, and I know I'm a little disqualified being white commenting on this, but I'm sure as a cop, Gabriel can comment a little bit more on this. But a study showed that up to 30 times more black people are killing black people than white people are killing white people. So yes, blacks.
Say that statistic one more time.
It was way earlier. It might have been 13 or it might have been 30 times more likely for a black person to murder than a white person is to murder. And
or to be murdered by somebody else.
Well, yeah, to be a participant in the murder, which is like what Jasper said. 93% of all black murders are from another black person. Same with white people. I think it's 89%. But the percentage of murders based on the percentage of the population is much higher in the Hispanic and African American community versus the white and the Asian community.
Well, isn't the white community almost twice as large as the black community?
No, yeah, I'm talking per capita.
Per capita. Yeah,
per capita, you're more likely to be killed as a black man by a black man.
I wrote down.
Yeah, go ahead.
I wrote down a few statistics just really quickly. In 2018, there were 996 fatal police shootings.
Yes.
207 were black, 399 were white, 148 were Hispanic, 36 were classified as other, and 204 unknown. 2019, the number jumped to 1,004. The number for Black went up to 235. The number for White went down to 370. Hispanic went up to 158. And so far this year alone, there have been 228 fatal police shootings, 31 Black, 42 White, 13 Hispanic, 3 other, and 139 unknown. So we look at, I mean, yeah, the numbers are different, but when it comes to community, it looks like the same problems persist in every community, in every racial group. So in America, we have this idea that a certain group is bad and another group is more noble and has their crap together. When in reality, America has a fundamental problem. There's a problem fundamentally in America that all across the board, we're all screwed up.
Yeah. I think that goes back to what we were talking about a little bit, how race has jacked a lot of us up. It really has jacked us up. On the other hand, it's also made us, for lack of a better phrase, relatively smart in comparison to other countries who don't have to deal with the question of race. And so on some level, we're able to talk about race in a way that other countries can't. I hear Kareem's point loud and clear. I do think that we do cry out. We've been crying out about the crime that takes place in our community for years. But I hear that we should be as upset about losing a life by someone who's Black killing another Black, the way we are outraged at a white person killing a Black person. And I hear you loud and clear about that. But Jasper, you were talking about that particular case. Yeah, that's a huge problem, and that case we talked about this. I think Kerr, you mentioned this your last show I was on. I was listening to you talked about it because this thing happened like 75 days ago, and the 2 individuals were arrested yesterday.
Yeah, sad. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, sad.
They
were shamed really by the video. The video was out, and that kind of shamed them. And but I take my hat off to. This is not to be anti-police, because Brother Gabriel is a great example of a person who is doing incredible work. We appreciate your service. But
NWA made you a great song. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they're rotten apples everywhere. And so these 2 individuals, it was horrible. I agree with you, Jasper. It was a bad situation. It was shades of yesterday, shades of the way. I'm going to just get it real historic just for a moment. That time period, certainly immediately after slavery, when the Klan or a group of men could go into a home and pull a Black man out and kill him and hang him. That used to happen. And so today we see kind of a modern day version of that. Now, they say that he was up to no good. They said he was looking into homes that were being constructed.
No excuse. I don't give a shit. None.
It was self-defense. Yeah, I want to hear from the police officer. Or it was self-defense. But it's hard to kind of make that case when the person doesn't have a weapon and he's running.
It doesn't matter. Anyway. They're not police. Police actually get a certain amount of immunity, believe it or not, even though it's getting less and less, I think, with the day of the video and stuff. They're getting less, but they get a little bit more benefit of the doubt that, they're chasing somebody that they're trained to look. This is why police should get in more trouble, in my opinion, because you're actually trained to look for weapons. You're actually trained to assess the situation. Those hicks, even though one was supposedly a retired investigator at the DA's office, they were not trained, especially the young guy that got out with a shotgun, because no cop would have gotten that close to anybody with a shotgun.
Father and son.
Yeah, they're idiots. Yeah, and it's embarrassing. It's just like what Muslims must feel like every time there's a terrorist thing. They're like, man, dude, come on, man. That's how I feel every time I see a white on Black basically lynching. Let's call it what it is. That was no different than a Black person back in Jim Crow days or before then when he whistled at a girl and they'd string him up. No different. Yeah. That guy did nothing wrong, and even if he did do something wrong, you call the police, you follow at a distance, let the police know where the location is, let the professionals do their job. All right, Gabriel, sorry, I'm off my soapbox. Go ahead.
No, you're good. We were actually talking about this today, and me and my coworkers, we were outraged on so many levels, because for one, like you mentioned, they're not law enforcement officers, right? So they're not certified by the state to take law enforcement action. Yes, that guy may have been a retired police officer, but he's not a police officer right now. That district attorney, he's not a police officer either, right? So yes, let's just say he did commit a crime, right? It's not up to you to take law enforcement action.
Well, there is a thing called citizen arrest, but it's
if someone's life is endangered or someone's property,
exactly
what it is being stolen. But it wasn't that. Look, as far as we know, as far as the video showed, the guy was just up for a jog, right? Let's say he did commit a crime, right? It's done and over with, right? No one's life is endangered. This guy's running away, and they just deprived this man of his life without due process.
Right. Without due process, exactly. You deprived him because you tried to be a hero. Listen,
exactly.
There's a reason why. How long was your police academy?
So the academy was a little over 6 months.
Okay,
but on top of that,
exactly,
we had another 6 more months of on-the-job training.
Exactly, because you're a professional at that job.
Right, because we're still constantly. I'm still learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that they should get rid of citizens arrest unless somebody's life. They need to recodify in all 50 states that unless somebody's life is in imminent danger. That's the only way you're allowed to step in. Because guess what? That poor guy.
Has everyone seen the video?
Yeah, yes, I showed it 3 times on this show, and I feel sick to my stomach.
Kareem, have you guys seen the video?
Yeah, I've seen the video, and
the reason I'm asking is because these 2 guys showed up with a shotgun, right? And I don't blame the guy for trying to fight back, because I mean, if 2 dudes showed up with a shotgun, like, hey man, I got to ask you a question. Like, dude, I don't know who you are.
Right.
You 2 showing up with a shotgun. That's threatening, right?
That's right.
So
in South Georgia.
So in South Georgia, right? Of all things, right?
And what would you do? This is what I asked my father-in-law. What would you do if you're running in a predominantly black neighborhood and one cuts you off with their car and the other cuts you off and then comes out with a gun and you have no choice? You would, of course, you would have been like, and they said, hey, they didn't even say like, hey, stop, we're placing you under citizen's arrest or anything like that. They're like, hey, we want to talk to you. I'll tell you what, if I was a black guy running in southern Georgia and you want to talk to me, that means you're about to kidnap me.
And that's why I don't run. That's why I don't run.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Well, just run with your weapon, and that's what your brother or somebody said. Exercise your Second Amendment right.
But also the law enforcement side of me, there's always more to the story. But it still doesn't mean it's going to justify the ends, right? But I still would like to know the whole story.
Everybody wants to know the whole story, but some things are so on their face, factually wrong.
The other part of it too is I didn't find out till today. This happened 11 weeks ago. That's egregious.
Yeah. Over 75 days ago.
3 prosecutors. Finally, the 3rd prosecutor brought the Georgia Bureau of Investigations in, and they finally impaneled the grand jury and charged these 2 guys. It is sad. It's an embarrassment on the white community.
It's not even that he got arrested. They still could have at least filed charges, but not taking him into custody. They didn't even file charges until what today.
How many unsolved murders is and you know how many unsolved murders it is in neighborhoods?
Yeah. Yeah, but the problem in the black community is the snitching culture. Like, white people will tell on each other, man. We snitch. You know what I'm saying?
Man, we're the same problem in our culture too, man. Let me tell you.
In the Hispanic culture?
Oh yeah. So one of the neighborhoods I police in, right? I was talking to the people. I'm like, hey man, it's kind of quiet around here. Nothing really happens. And they were like, no, stuff happens around here. It's like, why don't you report it? Like, well, because I'm getting up like that guy. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a reporting thing. It's a snitch culture. They don't want to tell on themselves.
What are you saying, Kareem?
That's right.
Nothing, man. I got y'all, and I'm just sad that we it only make news when we get killed by a white person. Man.
I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying.
I just don't get the site that I come from Chicago. I seen people get killed, shot, and it been got worse since I left. And I've been to other cities, and we just had a rapper get killed in his Airbnb. That was on the news for 2 days. It's gone. Them dudes still running around, probably, you know. So I just think that the black human life has it's just we just numb to it. It's just normal. Oh, he got shot. Oh well. Hey.
Well, the good news, Kareem, to give you a little hope.
A big deal.
To give you a little hope, the murder rate is down since the 1990s. 94, 93, 94 was the height of all even black on black crime. That was when Boys in the Hood come out and all that stuff. Great movies. You know, that's the good news. The bad news is that we hear more about it now because we are in a 24-hour news cycle. I do want to thank all my guests as we come down to the last few minutes of the show. Dr. Keith, thank you for donating 2 hours of your time. It's been great getting anything. Do you have any last words of wisdom, hope?
Well, I think I want to thank you, Nate. You're a rock star, and you were first class when we worked together. You were very helpful to me and our overall mission that we had at the Northeast Chaplain Recruiting Center. You were a blessing. And I appreciate the panel. I appreciate the intelligence that I've been able to be a part of this evening. And this is what America looks like. And this is what having a civil conversation about some very important issues should sound like. And I'm glad, I'm thankful that I've been able to be a part of this. And I would only say that each one of us should continue to do what we feel we've been called to do, to raise the right question at the right time, if we have something to say it, and to share, and to continue to keep pushing. Because I think the only way we're going to see our nation become a more perfect union is for all of us to continue to work collectively and work together. I'm really a big proponent of that. And do not be afraid of the other, because the other is you and the other is me.
Hey, speaking of the other, would you let your daughter hang out with Joe Biden? Just curious. No, you don't have to answer that. Jasper, any parting thoughts?
No.
I appreciate you guys, man. It was interesting.
Kareem.
Hey, great show, man. I love y'all. I love America.
Yeah.
Bless you.
And Gabriel.
Dr. Key, I appreciate you imparting your words of wisdom on us. I mean, it was awesome.
Yeah, Dr. Key is a future rising star in the Democrat Party. Hopefully he is that voice of moderation in the Democrat Party. And that does not just go for Democrats. We need voice of moderation on both sides. We need to get back to where people get locked into a room on a hill, on the Capitol Hill, and they don't leave until there's a compromise that comes out. Hey, God bless everybody. Everybody have a safe weekend. We are going to go into the outro, so if my guest can go on mute so it doesn't cover it over. I will see you guys Monday night, 9 p.m. By the way, if you have not subscribed or liked my YouTube channel, please do. I'm trying to get to 100. That way I get a special URL and I can actually market it better. And also like and follow our page. Spread the word about us. See you Monday night at 9 p.m. I think Jasper's on and Gabriel's on. So we'll talk to you then.
Thanks, guys.
This has been Nightcaps with Nate. Please join Nate for a nightcap every weeknight at 9 Eastern here on Facebook Live.
Peace.